Across the shifting sands of deserts, through jungles that breathe with time, and beneath the shadow of mountains carved by forgotten hands, they appear. Symbols, etched into stone long before history had a voice. Some are spirals that seem to pull the eye into eternity. Others are crude eyes, unblinking, watching across millennia. And yet others, shapes that defy simplicity, triangles within circles, crosses bound by serpents, the same figures appearing where they have no right to exist. From the basalt pillars of Göbekli Tepe to the sandstone cliffs of Australia, from the carved walls of Chavín de Huántar in Peru to the Neolithic chambers of Ireland, the markings whisper the same language. Their strokes are too familiar, their symmetry too deliberate. Archaeologists catalog them, trace them, measure them, but few dare to ask the question that echoes beneath. How could they be the same? Mainstream history tells us these were isolated civilizations, separated by oceans that no primitive man could have crossed. Yet here lies the first fracture in the story, a pattern too exact to be random. A spiral in Anatolia mirrors another carved on the cliffs of the Amazon. A set of 7 concentric circles found on a boulder in Britain repeats in exact proportion on the other side of the world. Coincidence, we're told, but the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to believe that the human hand could stumble upon the same sacred geometry by accident again and again. The camera of the mind pans over these ancient surfaces, their grooves filled with the dust of forgotten empires. You can almost feel the vibration of intent behind each chisel mark, as if those who carved them wanted to be remembered not by name but by symbol. To modern eyes, they are static art, but to those who first drew them, they were alive, gateways between the world of flesh and the realm of the unseen. In every culture, these symbols carry a charge, part warning, part worship. The eye stares back at the observer, the serpent coils through eternity. The spiral leads inward like a trapdoor to the soul. Why do they feel familiar, almost instinctive? Perhaps because they are older than civilization itself, fragments of something humanity carried from a forgotten dawn. Ancient myths tell of gods who descended from the sky, of luminous teachers who brought knowledge, of catastrophes that erased all traces of their age. Could these carvings be the only surviving echoes of that era? Or did early humans scattered across continents receive the same dream, the same terror, and carve it into stone to make sense of it? The scientific mind recoils from such notions. It insists upon coincidence, pattern recognition, pareidolia, the human habit of finding meaning in chaos. Yet beneath the logical explanations lingers a deeper unease. Because if these carvings are indeed connected, if their similarity is intentional, then the story of our origins is not just incomplete, it's wrong. Imagine standing inside a temple that predates written history, torchlight flickering across carvings that seem to move as shadows dance. You feel that same sensation countless generations must have felt, that you are being watched, not by something evil, but by something vast, something ancient, something that once knew you. The lines on the wall are not art. They are messages, carved by minds that understood the language of the universe in ways we no longer can. Over time, the symbols became myths, the myths became religions, and the carvings turned into relics. Scholars studied them, priests worshipped them, governments locked them away. Yet the symbols remain. In every continent, in every era, they return, persistent, unchanged, as if the stones themselves are trying to remember. And so we ask, were these merely shared dreams, born of the same human fears and longings? Or did they come from a single source, a civilization erased by time, whose voice still speaks through the marks it left behind? The stones do not answer, they only endure. Their silence is older than memory. But in that silence, one truth seems to hum like a buried current. The carvings shouldn't exist. Not in the same form, not across the world, not separated by oceans and epochs. And yet they do. And that single impossibility etched into rock is where our story begins. Long before cities, before kings, before even language itself, humanity learned to fear the unseen. In flickering torchlight, our ancestors carved their dread into stone, marks that outlasted the fire, the flesh, the memory. Everywhere we look, the same symbols emerge: the eye, the serpent, the spiral, the skull. Each an echo of the same emotion, fear of what lies beyond understanding. The eye was among the first, wide, eternal, watching from the rock. Across continents it appears. In Egypt it guarded pharaohs as the Eye of Ra. In the Andes it adorned the temples of the sun. In Mesopotamia it stared from clay idols buried for protection. The ancients carved it to ward off what they could not see, or to remind them that something else was watching, always watching. Then came the serpent, winding, eternal, devouring its own tail. To some it was the giver of wisdom, to others a bringer of death. Across myth and continent it slides through creation stories, whispering knowledge and ruin alike. The serpent is motion and stillness, life and decay, an endless circle that mirrors the cycle of existence itself. Its image coils around the stones of temples and caves, a warning that knowledge once taken cannot be returned. And the spiral, perhaps the most haunting of all. It begins with a single point and expands outward endlessly, like thought itself. From Newgrange in Ireland to the petroglyphs of Arizona, the same swirling mark draws the eye inward. To stare at it too long is to feel pulled into time itself. The birth and death of worlds, contained in a single turn. The ancients carved it into tombs, into altars, into the hearts of mountains. Was it a map, a memory, a warning? These images are not random. They are psychological fossils, remnants of how early humans made sense of terror. To them, the world was alive, every rock, every storm, every shadow filled with presence. The carvings were acts of control, desperate attempts to fix the unknown into form. When lightning struck or the earth shook, they didn't record it. They answered it, striking symbols into stone as if striking back at the gods themselves. But these marks did not merely record, they warned. Each symbol carried a story of loss, of reverence, of something humanity glimpsed and could never forget. Perhaps the carvings were meant not for their generation but for ours, reminders of dangers that once visited this world. And yet, despite the passage of 10,000 years, we still draw them. The eye stares from our currencies, the serpent from our crests, the spiral from our art. We have given them new meanings, new names, but not new origins. Some fears are too old to die. So what were these ancient people trying to tell us? What did they see or remember that drove them to carve the same warnings into the bones of the earth? Who first drew the mark? It begins with a single image, a symbol carved into the limestone pillars of Göbekli Tepe, Turkey. Two intersecting circles surrounded by a coiled line, half serpent, half sun. Archaeologists cataloged it, photographed it, measured its age, 12,000 years old, and moved on. But what they could not explain was this: the same symbol, nearly identical in proportion and intent, exists halfway across the world, carved into the granite of the Peruvian Andes at Chavín de Huántar. Thousands of miles apart, separated by oceans, by species of plants and animals that had never crossed paths. And yet somehow the stone speaks the same language. Göbekli Tepe, the so-called world's first temple, was built before the wheel, before writing, before agriculture as we know it. On its massive T-shaped pillars stand creatures, Foxes, vultures, serpents, humanoids with long arms and featureless faces. The artistry is confident, deliberate, almost coded. These were not idle decorations, they were statements. Some scholars call them representations of early deities, others of constellations. But to the intuitive eye, they look like messages, ancient visual manuscripts of something long forgotten. Now shift your gaze across time and sea to Chavín, Peru. Another megalithic complex, this one carved from mountain stone. Its walls carry nearly the same imagery. The fanged jaguar, the coiled serpent, the staring eyes that seem neither human nor animal. Even the geometry matches, twin concentric forms repeating zigzags, spirals that seem to hum with meaning. And again, the same faceless humanoids appear, elongated heads tilted skyward, as though waiting for something above. Then farther east, in the arid heart of Australia, stand the ancient petroglyphs of the Burrup Peninsula, Aboriginal rock art dating back tens of thousands of years. Among them a recurring figure, broad-shouldered, round-headed, with outstretched arms and large staring eyes. Locals call them Wandjina, sky beings, givers of law and rain. Their mouths are absent, as if speech was forbidden or unnecessary. It is impossible not to feel the echo. The same featureless faces of Göbekli Tepe, the same cosmic eyes of Chavín, now on the other side of the earth. How does this happen? How do isolated peoples, separated by oceans they never crossed, invent the same visual vocabulary? Mainstream archaeology offers a comfortable answer. Coincidence. The human brain, it argues, is wired to see certain shapes, circles, spirals, serpents, as universal forms of nature and self. The convergence, they say, is psychological, not historical. But the pattern feels too deliberate, too consistent. The same exact symbols carved with sacred precision appearing in sacred spaces aligned with celestial events. It's as if humanity in its earliest moments received a singular instruction, a pattern to remember, to repeat, to guard. When you trace these carvings on a map, a strange geometry appears. A network of stone voices stretching from Anatolia to the Andes, from the Australian desert to the African plain. Cultures that should have had no knowledge of one another share the same iconography, the same fears, the same reverence for the serpent, the spiral, the all-seeing gaze. Perhaps they were remnants of a mother civilization, an ancient source that scattered its knowledge before catastrophe struck. Or perhaps the earth itself inspired them. Some deep memory encoded into the human mind, surfacing again and again in art, in myth, in symbol. Whatever the cause, the effect is undeniable. Humanity's oldest carvings are not random scratches on stone. They are evidence of communication not between tribes but across time itself, a shared whisper of memory. And as the pattern grows clearer, another realization emerges. If these ancient peoples were all drawing from the same source, then maybe they weren't just remembering something. Maybe they were recording it. Ask a modern archaeologist about these similarities and you'll often receive a patient smile, the kind reserved for persistent myths. The symbols they'll explain are examples of convergent symbolism. In other words, humanity, wherever it emerged, drew from the same psychological toolkit. The spiral represents life and cycles because we see it in nature, in shells, storms, galaxies. The serpent reappears because it is universal, predator and healer, fear and fascination. The eye, they insist, is simply self-awareness. The rest is coincidence, nothing more. It's a clean, elegant explanation. And one that keeps the world comfortably predictable. Science thrives on patterns, but only those it can measure. Anything that crosses the boundaries of accepted timelines or suggests cultural contact before recorded history must be filed away as anomaly. To suggest otherwise would be professional suicide. The peer review system is a gatekeeper, and few scholars are willing to challenge its walls. And yet, the questions persist. Too many carvings, too many alignments, too many shared myths for coincidence to explain them all away. Outside academia's gates, a growing number of independent researchers, explorers, and rogue historians whisper a different story. They argue that what we're seeing is not convergent invention, but surviving fragments of a global memory. The fingerprints of a civilization older than we dare to acknowledge. They point to megalithic ruins that defy the tools of their supposed builders, to myths of floods and teachers from the sky that appear in every culture, to the precision geometry of ancient temples aligned to stars that no longer shine where they once did. These patterns, they argue, are not cultural coincidences. They are signatures, remnants of a unified knowledge system that collapsed long before our written histories began. The tension between the two camps is more than intellectual. It's emotional. One side seeks safety and certainty. The other feels truth vibrating in intuition. Science demands evidence. Mystery demands curiosity. And between them lies an uncomfortable space, where imagination and reason stare each other down, neither able to look away. Because deep down, even the most skeptical mind wonders, if all these civilizations imagined the same gods, drew the same symbols, feared the same sky, were they truly imagining it all? In the half-light of an Egyptian temple, the air heavy with the scent of sand and incense, the eye stares back from the stone, precise, symmetrical, eternal. The eye of Ra, or perhaps the eye of Horus. To the uninitiated, it is an emblem of protection. To those who carved it, it was power incarnate, the living gaze of a god who saw all, even the hidden. Its curves, the perfect balance of geometry and grace, mimic the human eye but extend beyond it, suggesting not a mortal vision but one that pierces the veil between worlds. Across an ocean and millennia later, the same eye appears again, not in Egypt's desert, but painted on Aztec codices, carved into Mayan temples, engraved on stones deep in Mesoamerican jungles. The same shape, the same pupil staring out from the serpent's coil. The Aztecs called it Tonatiuh, the sun, the ever-watchful god. And though the names change, the message remains. Something was watching, always watching. The serpent too slithers through time like a thread connecting civilizations. In Egypt, it is Apep, the devourer of light, fought nightly by Ra. In Sumer, it is Ningishzida, lord of the tree of life. In India, Ananta Shesha, the infinite serpent upon whom the universe rests. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent teacher of kings. Everywhere it coils, around staffs, pillars, and suns, symbolizing knowledge that can both elevate and destroy. The serpent is wisdom wrapped in danger, the double-edged truth mankind was never meant to wield freely. When the eye and serpent unite, the effect is chilling, as if the ancients were warning us that enlightenment and peril are born of the same seed. The serpent grants vision, but vision demands sacrifice. To see as the gods see is to risk becoming what they feared. And then there is the horned figure, the shadow lurking behind both symbols. From the bull-headed gods of Mesopotamia to the Minotaur of Greece, from the horned idols of Tzatulhoyuk to the Celtic Cernunnos, the horned being represents potency, chaos, and divine rebellion. In the Mesoamerican codices, similar forms appear. Half man, half beast, crowned with antlers or horns, presiding over serpents and eyes alike. This is the archetype of forbidden sovereignty. The creature that defied heaven by taking divine power into mortal hands. These three, the eye, the serpent, the horned one, form a trinity of ancient power. They appear wherever civilizations rise, as though shadowing humanity's every leap forward. They whisper of knowledge that transcends epochs, astronomy, sacred geometry, the mastery of life and death. But they also carry the weight of punishment, floods, fire, downfall. The myths agree on one thing: when man dares to look directly into the divine, he burns. To scholars, these images are cultural metaphors. To mystics, they are signs of continuity, a secret thread of knowledge guarded across ages, passed from Sumerian priests to Egyptian scribes, from Gnostic initiates to Masonic architects. Every appearance of the eye and the serpent is a marker in that lineage, a code that says, we remember what the world forgot. But remembrance is not without peril. The ancients carved their warnings not in fear of the unknown, but in fear of rediscovery. That one day we might awaken the same forces they barely survived. Each eye carved in stone, each serpent coiled in shadow is both invitation and curse. And as these symbols resurface in our modern age, on currencies, monuments, and digital empires, we are left to wonder, are we the inheritors of that forbidden knowledge, or merely the next civilization to be watched, tested, and judged by it? Everywhere these symbols appear, the serpent, the eye, the spiral, we assume devotion. We call them offerings, prayers, monuments to gods. But what if they were not tributes to summon the divine, but barriers to keep it away? Imagine a civilization that witnessed something it could neither explain nor forget, a blinding presence descending from the heavens, fire streaking through the skies, earth trembling beneath their feet. To them, it was no metaphor. It was survival. The symbols they carved afterward may not have been acts of worship, but of protection, the only language they had to contain the memory of terror. In nearly every myth, the gods descend amid destruction. The Egyptians spoke of the Eye of Ra unleashed upon humanity for its rebellion, scorching the world until even the gods recoiled. The Hopi tell of the serpent in the sky that rained fire, marking the end of the previous world. The Sumerians recorded storms of burning stones that fell from the heavens, the weapons of the gods. And across the ocean, the Mayans etched spirals beside depictions of chaos, water, and darkness, signs of worlds destroyed before ours. Could these recurring symbols be the echoes of one event, remembered differently by many? Perhaps an ancient catastrophe, a cosmic visitor, a comet, or something far stranger that seared itself into the collective human psyche. The serpent could be the fiery arc across the sky, the eye the blinding explosion, the spiral the whirl of smoke and debris that followed. What we now call religion might have begun as remembrance, the attempt to make meaning out of apocalypse. Yet as centuries passed, fear turned to reverence. The marks meant to ward off became marks to call upon. Humanity forgot the difference between warning and worship. The power once feared became divine, the terror sacred. So when we stand before those carvings today, tracing their smooth lines and perfect symmetry, we're not just seeing the birth of religion. We may be seeing the world's oldest trauma etched into stone. The question is no longer what they believed, but why. Were these symbols prayers to gods who once saved them, or desperate seals against gods who once returned? There are moments when stone seems to whisper, not with words, but with patterns that pulse with hidden intent. The ancients may not have left us books, but they left us something older, something more enduring. Stories written in symbol. And when we learn to listen, the stones begin to speak of fire and water, of gods and sky, of a world undone and remade. In the dusty ruins of Mesopotamia, beneath layers of time and empire, lie the Sumerian tablets, some of the earliest writings humanity ever etched. Among them are not just inventories of grain and kings, but memories of destruction, They speak of the great deluge, a flood sent by gods to cleanse the earth, preceded by omens in the sky, stars that shifted, thunder that did not come from clouds. The carvings accompanying the texts show waves rising higher than mountains and beings with strange, radiant eyes descending from the heavens. To the Sumerians, this was not mythology, it was testimony. Thousands of years later and half a world away, the Mayans told the same story, though in their own tongue of stone. On the stelae of Quirigua and Copan, intricate glyphs depict a serpent unfurling from the sky, its jaws spewing figures of light. Scholars translate it as the birth of gods, but the imagery suggests something else, a celestial intrusion, perhaps a comet or meteor tearing through the firmament. The Mayan priests recorded this in symbols, aligning their temples precisely with the stars that marked the event. Even today, their ruins correspond perfectly with celestial coordinates, as if their cities were built to remember the day the heavens fell. Across the ocean in India, temple walls bear carvings of similar power. In the ancient city of Hampi, celestial beings are shown wielding discs of light, chariots that blaze across the sky. The temples themselves are built with mathematical precision, their main spires aligned to constellations that thousands of years ago would have risen directly above the horizon. One relief even shows a sphere falling toward Earth, trailed by fire, surrounded by mortals shielding their faces. The priests who carved it called it Agni's descent, the fire that renews the world. Everywhere we look, the message repeats. The sky once changed, and the world that followed was not the same. The stories differ in detail, but the rhythm is identical. Arrogance, warning, destruction, rebirth. The serpent in the sky, the flood that followed, the gods who fled or perished. These myths are not random, they are coordinates. Modern science confirms what the ancients only described in allegory. Around 12,800 years ago, a series of cosmic impacts likely reshaped the Earth. Evidence of vitrified stone, sudden extinctions, and layers of black sediment appear across continents. If the ancients witnessed this cataclysm, their carvings were more than art. They were messages for whoever came next. The serpent, the spiral, the eye, all forms of remembrance. There is a strange beauty in this realization. The same symbols that we see as religious or aesthetic might be the oldest warning signs in existence. The ancients didn't just build temples. They encoded knowledge into architecture, aligning stone with star so that their message would repeat with the sky's own rhythm. When the constellations return to their positions, the story reawakens. Yet there is also unease. Because if these carvings were meant to warn, then we must ask, warn of what? That the sky will again unleash its fury. That history, like the stars, repeats. The ancients seemed to believe that the heavens themselves were alive, that what comes from above always returns. In every civilization that rose from ruin, the stones remained, silent, enduring, waiting for eyes that could understand. Perhaps they were never meant to be deciphered fully, only felt, their symbols resonating across time like faint echoes of survival. The stones whisper still, though few pause to listen. And if we listen closely enough, we might hear not just their fear, but their prophecy. Throughout history, every great civilization has spoken of those who knew. Not kings, not generals, but the quiet architects of temples, the scribes of secret glyphs, the keepers of languages that only the initiated could read. These were the intermediaries between gods and men, the priesthoods and mystery orders who claimed descent from an age before the flood. They called themselves the keepers of the first knowledge, and the symbols they guarded were said to be far older than the civilizations that used them. In ancient Egypt, initiation into the priestly ranks was not a ceremony, it was an ordeal. The temples of Abydos and Luxor concealed underground chambers where candidates were led blindfolded, reciting fragments of sacred texts. They were surrounded by carvings, serpents, eyes, and stars, each symbol a test of comprehension. Only those who could see beyond the surface survived the trial. To them, hieroglyphs were not writing but vibration, a sacred code meant to summon energies from realms unseen. The Eye of Horus was more than protection. It was perception itself, the awakening of divine sight. Egyptian priests claimed that their wisdom came from the followers of Thoth, survivors of an earlier age, the remnants of a drowned land known in later myths as Atlantis. Whether Atlantis was a place, a memory, or an allegory of lost knowledge, its shadow stretches across the ancient world. Plato wrote of it as a civilization destroyed for its arrogance, one that mastered forces beyond its understanding. The Egyptian priests told him it was no myth, only history forgotten. Fragments of this doctrine seeped into later faiths, in the mystery cults of Greece, the Hermetic texts of Alexandria, and the Gnostic Gospels buried to hide them from persecution. All spoke of a dual world, the outer for the many, the inner for the few. The uninitiated saw symbols as stories, the initiated saw them as instructions. These secret societies believed knowledge itself was divine, but also dangerous, a flame to be protected from the unready. So they encoded it, hid it in architecture, allegory, and ritual. The serpent was their teacher, the eye their compass, the spiral their map. To the world they were myths and gods. To the initiates they were transmissions, ancient signals carried forward by chosen hands. Somewhere between devotion and defiance, they became the builders who knew too much, guardians of a wisdom the world wasn't meant to remember yet somehow never forgot. Centuries later, that same flame flickered beneath new guises. The fall of temples gave rise to secret manuscripts, the age of gods to the age of alchemists. The language changed. Latin replaced hieroglyphs, parchment replaced stone, but the symbols endured. In candlelit chambers, medieval alchemists traced serpents devouring their tails, the Ouroboros across the margins of their codices. They spoke of transmutation, but not merely of metals, of the soul itself. The eye reappeared as illumination, the moment when matter remembered its divine source. Every alembic, every furnace, was a microcosm of the cosmic forge the ancients once described. The Kabbalists of the Middle Ages whispered of a tree of life connecting heaven and earth, its geometry echoing the same spirals and eyes carved into ancient stone. Each sephirot was a gate, each path a symbol of ascent, a reenactment of mysteries first carved in the desert sands. And then came the Masons, literal builders who carried figurative light. Their cathedrals rose like encoded prayers, geometry, proportion, and symbol fused into stone. The all-seeing eye crowned their compass, the serpent coiled within their labyrinthine myths. They claimed descent not from masons alone, but from the ancient architects, from Enoch, from Hermes, from Thoth himself. Across centuries and continents, these threads converge into one tapestry, a lineage of remembrance. While empires fell and religions rewrote the world, a small circle of minds preserved something older. The conviction that truth was too powerful to be destroyed and too dangerous to be revealed. And so, beneath the surface of history, the same symbols continued to breathe, passed from chisel to quill to compass, whispering the same message through time. Humanity may have forgotten their language, but the symbols remember. In the polished halls of academia, truth often wears a lab coat. Sterile, precise, and comfortably contained within the boundaries of accepted theory. But outside those walls, buried beneath forgotten ruins and whispered among the curious, lies a different truth, one too wild, too inconvenient, too dangerous to publish. Archaeology, for all its noble intentions, walks a narrow bridge between discovery and denial. Imagine a young archaeologist kneeling in the dust, brushing away centuries from a strange artifact. A stone tablet bearing symbols that predate the civilization she's supposed to be studying. Her heart races, her training tells her it shouldn't be there. The discovery could rewrite timelines, challenge funding sources, and threaten the reputations of mentors who built their careers on the current story. What does she do? She takes a photo, makes a note, and quietly sets it aside. The artifact will be reclassified or awaiting verification. It will vanish into the vaults of silence. Interviews with real researchers and those who dared to go further reveal an unspoken fear. They talk of grant committees that dry up when results contradict textbooks, of colleagues who turn cold when data doesn't align. Academia rewards certainty, not heresy. And so, even brilliant minds learn to bury their doubts under the sands of professionalism. We are taught to preserve careers, not to chase ghosts, one scholar once admitted. But sometimes the ghosts are real. Out-of-place artifacts, a metal sphere in Precambrian rock, a map showing Antarctica without ice, ancient walls beneath the sea, should inspire awe. Instead, they inspire avoidance. To acknowledge them fully would mean unraveling the tapestry of human history and starting over. And history, like any empire, defends itself. Still, some archaeologists look into the forbidden corners. They whisper about patterns that should not exist, about layers of civilization erased not once but many times. They see connections between symbols, architectures, and myths that their peers dismiss as fringe. To speak openly is to risk ridicule. To stay silent is to betray curiosity. Between those choices lies the archaeologist's dilemma, the conflict between truth and tenure. The stones do not care who studies them. They wait, indifferent to politics, their whispers growing louder as more anomalies emerge. The real tragedy is not that the answers are hidden. It's that those most capable of understanding them have been trained not to listen. Throughout modern history, a handful of voices refused to stay silent and paid the price. Zecharia Sitchin, who claimed the Sumerian gods were beings from beyond the stars, was mocked by his peers but read by millions. Immanuel Velikovsky suggested planetary catastrophes reshaped human memory and was banished from academia for daring to connect myth with science. Graham Hancock, labeled a pseudo-archaeologist, continues to challenge orthodox timelines, insisting that a forgotten civilization preceded the last ice age. Their critics called them dreamers, opportunists, even frauds. Yet time has a strange sense of irony. Geological evidence, genetic studies, and new archaeological finds have begun to echo the very patterns these outsiders proposed decades ago. The more we uncover, the less certain the official story becomes. But why such hostility? Why does the scientific establishment react with fear, not curiosity, to alternative ideas? Perhaps because true revision threatens the structure that keeps knowledge and authority intact. Every new discovery risks exposing that history is not a linear tale of progress, but a cycle of remembering and forgetting. These lost researchers stand as cautionary tales, not of folly, but of courage. They remind us that progress often begins as heresy, and that truth rarely arrives wearing credentials. And so we are left to wonder, what did they truly uncover or rediscover that made the world so uncomfortable? It begins as light, a second sun blooming where no sun should be. Across the ancient world, eyes turned upward in terror as the heavens ignited. What they saw was burned into their memory and carved into stone. Comets with flaming tails, serpents twisting through the sky, and radiant disks descending from the clouds. These were not idle myths. They were records, humanity's attempt to make sense of a sky that had turned against them. From the deserts of Egypt to the icy plateaus of North America, ancient carvings tell the same story. On the ceiling of Dendera Temple, the Egyptians etched a serpent coiling through the constellations. The celestial serpent, bringer of fire. In Australia, Aboriginal rock art shows streaks of flame cutting across the heavens, accompanied by figures fleeing beneath a raining sky. Far to the north, the petroglyphs of Scandinavia depict circular suns with tails, comets drawn centuries before astronomers gave them names. Everywhere the message repeats, the sky once burned. Science now whispers the same story. Around 12,800 years ago, something struck Earth. A series of fragments, perhaps from a disintegrating comet, that detonated in the atmosphere with the force of 1,000 nuclear blasts. The evidence lies buried in the soil, a thin layer of black sediment found on every continent, rich in nanodiamonds and platinum, the fingerprints of cosmic impact. It is called the Younger Dryas boundary, the scar of an extinction event that ended an age. The symbols carved into ancient stone may be our ancestors' eyewitness accounts of that moment. The serpent, long thought to represent fertility or wisdom, could just as easily have been the fiery arc of a comet winding across the night. The spiral, a symbol of creation, may have been the image of the explosion itself, a rolling vortex of flame and dust. The gods who descended from the heavens were not beings at all, but fragments of the sky, falling to earth like judgment. In the wake of that celestial fire, the world drowned. Glaciers melted, rivers swelled, seas consumed the coasts. Cities and settlements vanished beneath the deluge. The flood myths that echo through every culture, from Noah's Ark to the Epic of Gilgamesh, from the Deucalion of Greece to the Manu of India, may all trace back to the same cataclysm. What one civilization saw as divine wrath, another recorded as rebirth. The survivors carved their stories not to glorify gods, but to warn whoever would follow. It happened once, and it will happen again. The more we study these ancient carvings, the clearer their message becomes. They are not random motifs nor religious fantasies. They are the fossilized memories of trauma, the earliest form of science recorded in symbol instead of word. The sun discs of Egypt, the feathered serpents of Mesoamerica, the fire wheels of India, all different languages describing the same phenomenon. Fire from the sky, the great unmaking. But within the destruction, a pattern emerges. Survival through remembrance. Those who lived passed their knowledge forward in secret, hiding it in geometry, architecture, and myth. The alignments of their temples mirror the stars, not for beauty, but for warning. The ancients tracked the heavens obsessively because they knew the sky is both cradle and killer. Standing before these ancient carvings, it is impossible not to feel their urgency. The flames they saw may be gone, but the fear remains etched into the earth itself. The stones remember the night when the gods of fire came down, and the dawn that followed when humanity rose again from ash. Perhaps that is why these symbols persist in every age. They are not just art or religion, they are prophecy. A reminder written in the oldest language we know, that the universe does not forget, and that the sky one day will burn again. The deeper one studies the ancient carvings, the more a strange intelligence seems to emerge, as if the symbols themselves form a code, a system of knowledge waiting to be deciphered. What at first appears to be religious art begins to align with mathematics, astronomy, even quantum thought. Spirals, triangles, and eyes, all arranged not at random but in ratios of sacred geometry. It's as though the ancients knew that the universe spoke in pattern, and they sought to mirror its voice in stone. Take the spirals of Newgrange, the Nazca lines, or the mandalas of India. Each reflects a recurring truth. Energy moves in cycles. Consciousness expands in waves. The eye, when stripped of its mythic names, begins to look less like an emblem of divinity and more like a symbol of perception itself, awareness observing the cosmos and the cosmos observing back. Across temples and tablets, the same image repeats, a gaze enclosed in radiance, framed by serpents or rays of light. It represents not simply sight, but the universe becoming aware of itself through us. Modern physics echoes this ancient intuition. The observer, scientists now say, influences what is observed. Consciousness is not an afterthought of creation, but an ingredient within it. Thousands of years earlier, the builders of Göbekli Tepe and Karnak may have carved that same realization in stone. The eye was not just watching the heavens, it was the heavens, looking inward. These parallels stretch beyond mysticism. Ancient layouts, from Angkor Wat to the pyramids, trace planetary alignments and magnetic nodes with uncanny precision. The serpent winding through their designs can be read as energy, life force, current, frequency. Even the so-called horned gods may represent electromagnetic fields drawn by cultures that understood the invisible architecture of reality. Perhaps then the ancients were not ignorant dreamers but experimenters in consciousness, mapping the correspondence between heaven, earth, and mind. Their symbols were tools, not mere decorations. Diagrams of how the human spirit resonates with the cosmic pulse. The eye in this sense is a mirror. When we look into it, we do not see gods. We see ourselves reflected through the ages, remembering what we once knew. The message beneath their carvings may be this: that awareness itself is the lost technology, the key that connects creation, destruction, and rebirth. Humanity has not just watched the universe. It is the universe, trying to understand its own reflection. Symbols are the oldest words humanity ever spoke. Silent, precise, immune to translation. They are the DNA of memory, each one a fragment of understanding that refuses to die. Civilizations collapse, languages fade, but the spiral, the serpent, the eye remain. They travel through time like messengers, unbound by empire or creed. To carve a symbol was to participate in eternity. Every mark, from the first cave etching to the alchemist's sigil, carries a pulse of recognition, as if humanity scattered across continents has always been trying to remember the same thing. The form changes, the meaning deepens, but the essence endures. Awareness, transformation, the bridge between matter and mind. This continuity suggests something profound, that symbols are not inventions but discoveries. They existed before us, patterns written into the fabric of nature, waiting to be seen. When early humans drew the spiral, they were copying galaxies. When they carved the eye, they were imitating the atom, the storm, the self. Every culture touched a piece of the same truth, like blind sculptors shaping the face of the infinite. And perhaps that is why these forms feel sacred, not because they belong to any one god, but because they belong to all consciousness. The ancients may have known what modern science is rediscovering, that information, not matter, is the true foundation of existence. In this sense, symbols are humanity's oldest mirror, reminders that we have been here before, that we have forgotten and remembered countless times. They speak across millennia, urging us not to worship the past, but to awaken to it. For in every spiral, in every eye, in every coiled serpent, there is one enduring message: that we are the storytellers of the universe, and the universe is still listening. History, it seems, is less a straight line than a spiral. looping endlessly through revelation and ruin. Civilizations rise, achieve brilliance, and vanish, only for their symbols to resurface centuries later in new hands, speaking the same message in a different tongue. The more one studies the record, the clearer the pattern becomes. Humanity does not evolve in one direction. It remembers, forgets, and remembers again. From Sumer to Egypt, from the Indus to the Andes, the same motifs appear, as if some unseen hand is guiding the brush. The eye, the serpent, the horned god, the spiral of fire, always reappearing at the threshold of great change. Were these coincidences or signatures of a force that transcends culture and time? The ancients called it divine intervention, the return of the gods. Others might call it contact. Perhaps it is neither. Perhaps it is consciousness itself, a force that rises within humanity whenever we near a turning point. Each time we climb toward enlightenment, something awakens to guide or to test us. The same knowledge, the same hubris, the same downfall. The script repeats because the author never left. When we compare myths from opposite ends of the earth, they read like variations of a single cosmic play. The flood that erases, the fire that cleanses, the light that descends. The heroes who defy the heavens and the gods who punish them for remembering too much. Behind every pantheon, behind every scripture, there lingers the same echo. We have been here before. Perhaps this is the real meaning behind the universal symbols. They are not merely remnants of a forgotten civilization, but checkpoints along the cycle. Warnings left for each new world that rises from the ashes of the last. Every spiral carved in stone is a map of recurrence, every eye a reminder that we are being watched, not by aliens or gods, but by our own past. Modern science calls it precession, the turning of the heavens through millennia. The ancients knew it as the Great Year, the rhythm of destruction and rebirth woven into the sky itself. They measured it, feared it, prepared for it. To them, time was not progress, it was a wheel. And on that wheel, humanity spins endlessly, forgetting the lessons of the fire, the flood, the fall, until the symbols rise again to remind us. Maybe that is why the carvings never die. They are the fingerprints of eternity, the same hand, the same story written again and again in the language of stone. The symbols did not vanish with the ancients, they merely changed their masks. Look closely at the architecture of power. The pyramids of finance, the temples of governance, the sigils of secret orders, and you will see them. The all-seeing eye still hovers above the pyramid, this time not carved in limestone but printed on currency. The serpent winds through medical emblems and military insignias alike. The horns, once worn by gods, now crown brands and ideologies. In the halls of Freemasonry, the compass and square frame the eye of providence, a geometry inherited from forgotten temples. In the corridors of the Vatican, spiral mosaics and serpent-like corridors mirror designs thousands of years older than the church itself. Even our cities, when viewed from above, echo sacred proportions once reserved for gods. Grids aligned with solstices, monuments placed upon ancient ley lines. These are not accidents of design. They are continuities, threads of a memory humanity refuses to cut. The old marks of worship and warning have evolved into the modern language of control and symbolism. The same patterns that once guided the soul now govern nations and corporations. The irony is chilling. The symbols that once protected mankind from divine wrath now adorn the empires of men. What was once carved in reverence is now stamped in secrecy. The eye still watches, but whom does it serve? The ancients carved to remember. We design to forget. Yet the symbols persist, whispering beneath the noise of progress, reminding us that history's script is still unfolding, and that the next act may already be written. The marks never left us. They simply learned to hide in plain sight. The story began with carvings on stone, but perhaps it never truly began. Perhaps it has always been repeating. Across the continents, through epochs long erased by flood and fire, the same patterns emerge, the same symbols reappear, as if the world itself keeps writing and rewriting its own memory. The serpent coils again. The eye opens again. Humanity, the unwilling scribe, keeps chiseling the same warnings into new walls, forgetting that the words are its own. We like to think of time as progress, a steady march forward from primitive cave to digital skyline. But what if time is not a line at all? What if it's a loop, an ancient pulse that resets the world when it grows too proud of its own knowledge? Each age invents, ascends, collapses, and forgets. And in the silence that follows, the same marks return. The ancients carved them in stone. We etch them now in code. But the impulse is the same, a desperate need to remember. Maybe those who came before us weren't chronicling history. Maybe they were warning the future. As the evidence accumulates, a haunting pattern takes shape. The civilizations that once bore the serpent in the eye reached remarkable heights of art, astronomy, and power, then vanished, leaving behind the very same signs we find ourselves surrounded by today. The eye that once gazed from temple walls now peers from digital screens. The serpent that once adorned staffs of priests now coils through the circuitry of our creations. We have resurrected the same archetypes, unaware that we are reenacting the same ritual. The question that lingers is not whether these symbols hold truth, but whether they hold memory. A memory so deep that it transcends language, re-emerging whenever humanity approaches the edge of rediscovery. Could it be that these forms are the universe's way of reminding us that consciousness itself is cyclical, awakening in waves, forgetting in between? The idea is unsettling because it places us not at the dawn of understanding, but somewhere in the middle of a story too vast to see. We may think we're discovering lost civilizations, but perhaps they are rediscovering us. Through the same symbols, the same fears, the same reaching toward the stars. Every time we decode an ancient glyph or rebuild an old myth with new words, we are helping the universe remember itself. The world in its strange and silent intelligence keeps writing through us, shaping minds to carry the same message it has whispered for millennia. You have been here before. You will be here again. So as we look upon the eyes carved in stone, the spirals in sand, the serpents of light and code that thread through our modern world, the realization dawns quietly, almost painfully. These are not relics of the past. They are reflections. The same language written by the same mind across the same canvas. The earth itself. And perhaps that is the most disturbing truth of all. Not that we found these symbols, but that they found us. And through us, the world continues to write its endless story, waiting for the moment when we finally learn to read it.